Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to build a Lumenier QAV250 the correct way. Now there's millions of ways to build these, so when I say the correct way I'm referring more to choosing the components. You can head over to my website, I'll put a link in the description below and I'll explain to you what I mean by choosing all the correct components. So we're just going to focus on the build here. The components I'm using here versus the recommended way by GetFPV, you're not only going to save about $140, but you're going to get a much better quad that flies a lot better, and it has OSD also. So let's get started, and I'll just kind of go over all the components that I'm using right here. Let's just start over here. I'm going to be using the Immersion RC 600 milliwatt video transmitter. I've tried a lot of transmitters, and this one is always gives me the best signal and the cleanest picture. So we'll just be using this. And then, well, this transmitter comes with its own little antenna, but it doesn't give you a very good picture. So I'll be upgrading the antenna to these spiral net antennas. These little disc looking things. They give you a much better picture and a much better range also. And then again, I've tried a whole bunch of different FPV cameras, and this is the one that always gives me the best picture. This is the Sony PZ0420 600 TVL camera. This one gives you a good picture, and in daylight and like in darker areas. Say if you're like flying in a garage or something. If there's not enough light, the picture turns black and white, but you still get a pretty clear picture and let you fly in low light situations. And also, say you're flying through in a place where there's a lot of dark and bright places, this camera will give you the best dynamic range to let you see the difference between the lights and the darks also. And we'll be using the Naze 32 Acro board. This board is about $25, and I think it's much better than the recommended CC3D board that GetFPV recommends. Not only is it cheaper, but I think it's a lot easier to program, and it also has a built-in voltage regulator that lets you monitor your battery while you're flying, and it has a buzzer output. So you can connect that up to a buzzer, and you can set it to be a discovery buzzer. Say if you lose your quad in tall grass or something, I'll show you how to hit a switch on your Tyrannus or on your remote, and it'll start beeping so you can find your quad better. And also you can set up the buzzer to alert you when your battery drops to a certain point, because these LiPos, they drop, the power drops pretty fast once it hits that critical point. And we'll be using this FreeSky D4R2 receiver. I really like these because they're so small and they support PPM, which means instead of connecting a wire to all 4 channels, you can connect just one wire on channel 1 or one channel, and it'll output 8 channels for your Naze 32. So it makes it a lot easier to hook up, and it cleans up your build a lot more. And I'll also be using this little custom 3D printed mount that we'll be using. Next is I'll be using these DYS SN20A speed controllers. These are they weigh about 2 grams each, so they're a lot smaller than the normal ESCs you're used to. This is a 12 amp Afro next to the BL20 SNBL20A. You can see that it's much smaller. The reason they can make it so small is that these ESCs are opto, that means that there's no built-in BEC. BEC is a battery emitter circuitry, which outputs. It has a 5-volt output to power your NAES32, but since we're using this this OSDoge board, it has a regulated 5-volt to power the NAES32, so we won't need the BEC on the ESC. So we're just going to use these tiny BL20As, and these are already flashed with BL Heli and one shot ready and dampen light already. So the motors that I'm using for my build are the Cobra 2204 1960 kV motors. Because I plan on running 5045 props on a 4S battery, this motor is going to give me the power I need to run those 5045 props. If this is your first build, I would highly recommend going with a 2300 kV motor, because the 2300 kV, well, the kV part means how many RPMs per volt. So the lower the number, the less RPMs it's going to spin, but it's going to give you more torque or more power to use more powerful props that have more thrust, like the 5045 or like 6-inch props. So if you go with a 2300 kV motor, it's going to let you run little smaller props but spin faster, like the 5030s, and that will give you a smoother flying quad with better run times. So I mean, if you start off, if you're a beginner and you start off with a motor like this with 5045s, it just means you're probably going to crash faster and harder and replace things faster. So if you're a beginner, I would recommend going with the 2300 kVs. But whatever motor you choose, I would highly recommend going with the 2204s versus the recommended 1806 motors, because you can see the 1806 over here. These are the Lumenier 1806 motors. You can see they're a lot taller, so when you crash, you're going to damage your motors a lot faster. They're more susceptible to getting bent motor shafts or bent casings. You can change the shafts, but even though it's a pain in the butt, but if you bend the casing, it's pretty much toast. You'll have to replace the motor because you'll probably never get it back to perfect, and then you're going to get a whole bunch of vibrations in your quad. So whatever motor, go with the 2204s, the flatter ones. If you're going with a 2300 kV, Cobra makes a 2204 2300 kV, and so does Sunny Sky. Sunny Sky, I mean, to me, they fly just as well as Cobra motors. I mean, I've tried both, and there's yeah, you can't tell a whole lot if you're just a beginner on how the flight performance. So I mean, either motor you go with, you're gonna get a good quad. Okay, in my build, we'll be using this OSDoge board. Currently, these are about $70. It sounds like a lot of money, but for all the things that it does and replaces, it's really not all that much. The main purpose of this board is to provide OSD, which is on-screen display. It lets you see things such as your current flight modes, current battery voltage, and it's got a built-in LC filter to filter out the signal before it goes to the video transmitter. And when stacked on top of the NAES32, like this, when you connect it up to the RX and TX, it'll let you tune your PIDs. So I mean, if you get all the stuff separate, like the LC filter is about $15. Oh, and it's also got a it provides a 5-volt to power your NAES32, because the ESCs we're using don't have the BSC. We'll be using this to power the NAES32. So if you get a BEC, those are about $10 to $15. OSD is about, I don't know, $12 to $15, and LC filter is about $15. So if you add it all up, it comes out to about $40 to $45. But the biggest advantage of this is that it cleans up your build so much because you're eliminating three components and onto one board, and it stacks on really nicely. Just for if you didn't have this board and you wanted OSD, you would have to use a setup like this big mess of wires. This is just the OSD part, minimum OSD, and then you have to add the BEC and an LC filter, so you're gonna have a whole jumble of wires on your quad, and it's gonna look super messy. Instead of all that, you can have something just like this. This is my Zool, and the minimum, the OSDoge is right here, and it just, you know, this part goes out to the camera and video transmitter, so it cleans up your build a lot. Just for that, I would pay extra money for that, and plus it makes everything easier to build and troubleshoot because you don't have like a buttload of wires to connect. Okay, so this is my second QAV250 build. Let's go over the contents of the box, and then I'll show you my old one. Okay, so the first thing I noticed on this version of the QAV250 is that the frame is different from the old one. The old one, as you can see, my busted one, it has these holes over here cut out on the arms right here, versus the new ones, they don't have it cut out, which is a smart thing because I mean it looks cool with a cutout, but you're cutting the strength of your frame in half over here by getting rid of this carbon fiber. As you can see, this is where I broke it right here. So when they left this part in, you can see you get a whole bunch more carbon fiber, and you can tell it's going to be a lot stronger. So, and that's the same thing with the G10 frame also. As you can see, after I broke my carbon fiber, I didn't want to pay $55 to replace it, so I tried the G10, which is $45 to replace, but it's even weaker than the carbon fiber. I crashed this thing and it broke in like, I think on my second or third flight. It wasn't even a hard crash. I just kind of landed a little hard and it split the G10. So another reason to build this way that I'm showing you versus the Get FPV way is that the parts that they recommend, like their ESCs and their motors, are really expensive versus, you know, some other brand that's not Lumenier branded. So for instance, the motor that they recommend, the Lumenier 1806 2300 kV, is exactly the same motor as a T motor 1806 2300 kV. If you look at the specs on their website, they're exactly the same. They even look the same. And the only difference is the Lumenier motor is, I think, $35, and the T motor is $25. So for a set, you're going to be paying $40 more for these versus these, and they're the exact same thing. And also the ESCs that they recommend, the 12 amp ESCs, they still run BL Heli, and they only handle up to 3 cell, and these are, I think they're $14 each, whereas these SN20A DOIS, these are $12. They handle 4S, and they handle 20 amps too, so they're a lot more powerful than these Lumenier ones. Plus they're way smaller and lighter. Okay, so the frame, looking good. It's thicker, stronger. We'll see how it flies. And inside, you know, you get all your hardware. You get all your standoffs, your neoprene tape, Velcro, your XT60 battery connector and all your screws and everything. Even comes with a little tool. And this is the power distribution board that we'll be using. Goes on the bottom of here. Makes the build a lot cleaner and easier to do, because you don't have to make your own wire harness. And this little carbon fiber piece is to mount your FPV camera, but we're going to be using a custom 3D printed part, kind of like this. But I'll show you when the time comes. And then these are the LEDs that mount on the bottom. If you're a beginner, I would recommend putting these on, but since I'll be mostly just flying FPV, I won't be able to see the LEDs anyway, so I'm just going to leave it off because it's pointless and it draws power. And then here's your top plate for your, well, self-explanatory, goes on top of here. And then you get another bag of screws. Okay, for this build, I'm going to be using my Tyrannus X9D. This version is not the Plus. My Tyrannus is the a little bit of older version. The new one, the Tyrannus X9D Plus, all the functions are pretty much the same, except the Plus has vibrating alerts. But everything else that we're going to be programming on this one is pretty much the same. And I'll be using my Fat Shark Dominator V2s for the FPV part. Mine has the little sponge face plate with the fan to keep the fogging down to a minimum. Haven't had a chance to really use these yet, but they look pretty cool. Okay, so let's get started building. Okay, so this is the basic schematic for our build. We'll just start at the NAES 32 right here. The NAES 32, you're going to connect the channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the corresponding ESCs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll show you which one goes to where on the quad later. But because the ESCs are opto, meaning there's no BEC, as you can see there's only a signal wire coming in, it's going to be powered by the OSDoge. So these little red dots you see on the board here and here, these are where they're going to connect when you stack the OSD board on top of the NAES 32. So this is where you're going to get your 5 volts from on the NAES 32 on channel 6. And then this one is a TX-RX. This will let you tune your PIDs from your controller and your goggles. And then this is where your VBAT will come in. Normally for the NAES 32 you would connect this part up directly to the battery, but on this OSD board you're going to connect it here. And then this board, the OSD board, is going to get the power from VBAT right here, and you'll connect this directly to the battery. And then same thing on the ESCs, you just connect positive to all the positives on the ESC, negative to all the negatives. And then on the D4R2, we'll be running in PPM mode. PPM mode means you can just connect channel 1 and it'll output 8 channels for you. To get PPM on the D4R2, use the top row pins, which is channel 1, and put a jumper wire across channel 3 and 4. The D4R2 comes with these little black squares. Those are jumper wires for this. And then the good thing about this OSD part, it makes connecting the FPV part really easy. It's all labeled right here. This part on the right is for the video camera, and then on the left is for the transmitter. So you just connect it exactly like what it says on the board: negative, positive, signal, goes to negative, positive signal on the camera. And then on the video transmitter side, we'll be using this Immersion RC 600 milliwatt transmitter. You just connect it the same way. Just ground, positive is going to go to the ground and positive on the transmitter, and then the signal lead will go on this 5-pin Molex, except you're going to remove the outer and inner 2 wires, and you're just going to keep the middle one, the yellow wire that goes to video. And then you're going to connect a buzzer on the buzzer output on the NAES32, negative on the outside and positive on the inside. So that's the basic setup we're going to be doing for this build. I'm pretty OCD when it comes to my builds. I like everything nice and clean and neat with minimal wires. So a lot of the steps I'm doing is not exactly necessary, but it's just to clean up the build. But if you just follow the schematic right here and build everything like this, your quad will fly just fine, and you can follow along with this build. Okay, so we're going to prepare the ESCs to be soldered onto the power distribution board. I'm going to do this a little bit weird, or might seem weird. Normally for the ESCs, you would connect your ESCs, this one to this power, and this one to this power. But because the BL Heli, or these BL20As, the power is reversed, I'm going to connect the grounds and power to the ones across from it. I want this side up because if I have it this side down like this, I can't access the solder points for the signal and ground and the motor wires over here. If it's like that, it's going to be really hard to solder. So I'm just going to do it this way and connect them up like this across, like this, and then I'll, whoops, like this. And then I'll just kind of be crossing the powers over. This one is going to go here. This one is going to go here. It doesn't really matter where you connect your power and negative, as long as you go, negative to negative, positive to positive, because all these positives are connected to the same thing. Same thing with the negatives. Once you connect the battery, just make sure you connect positive to positive and negative to negative, and you won't have a problem there. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the heat shrink off the speed controllers, so we can get to the solder points. And in this build, I'm going to be soldering the motors directly onto the ESCs, because I'm going to try to make this quad as light as possible. So I'm going to remove these because they're not needed, and then I'm going to remove this also because we're going to shorten the wire over here at the ESC, instead of trying to cut it here and then trying to solder these tiny little things back in, because it's a pain in the ass. So we're going to remove the wires that we won't be using off the ESCs. I got my soldering iron preheated to about 750 degrees, so hopefully this will come off pretty quickly. And then we're going to remove the signal and ground off this also, so it'll be easier to shorten later. Okay, so one ESC is done and ready to be mounted. So I'm just going to do the same for all the other ones. So now I have all the ESC wires that we're not using removed, and I'm going to get ready to start soldering them onto the power distribution board. So I'm just going to start measuring the wire and cutting them. So I'm just going to do this like this, and then we're going to connect it on the other side. So I'm just going to kind of guess where it goes. Leave a little room for error. That. And then I'm going to tin these, the ESC wires a little, so it'll make it easier to solder. That's a lazy way to do it. Okay, and next I'm going to tin all the pads on the distribution board. Makes it a lot easier when you start soldering. So now I have all the ESCs cut, pre-tinned, and the power distribution boards tin also. I can start soldering the ESCs to the power distribution board. So it's gonna look a little weird because I'm gonna cross it over because the way the positive and negative leads are. So when you're soldering this, you want to make sure after the solder melts, you don't want to move the wire, because then you'll get a cold solder joint, and that'll be bad. Okay, so I've temporarily mounted my NACE 32 and my power distribution board on the bottom. So I'm going to get ready to solder the signal wires back onto the ESC so we can connect it onto the NACE 32. So this is how I'm going to have this set up. I'm going to have this is the front of the quad over here. And I'm going to have the NACE 32 pointing to the right, so I have access to my USB, my mini USB on the left side. If you have it set like this, I'll show you later in clean flight, you have to adjust the, do the yaw adjustment so that it's correct for this position. Normally the NACE 32 is like this. You'll see this little arrow right here. It's supposed to be pointing to the forward, to the front. So if you have it set up like this, you don't have to do any adjustments in clean flight. But if you have it any other way than to the front, you have to make that adjustment. And I'll show you how to do that once we get into clean flight. I like to have it on the side because even if I have a battery in my quad, I still have access to my USB. But if you have it in the back like this, you have to pull out your battery in order to get to the USB. So like this, you can easily get to it. Okay, so next I'm gonna solder this little 4-pin 90-degree header on the bottom of my NACE 32. So it's gonna go on the bottom of this right here. And then all my signal wires are going to come from the ESCs under the NACE 32, and they're going to connect under right here. Okay, so I've got the signal and ground removed off these big 3-pin connector things, and I took 2 of them and I just cut one in half, or cut one of them off, so I ended up with 2 connectors with two holes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in, just like that, put 2 in each. And then after that, I'm going to label them. So it'll make it easier when I start connecting these up. Just going to label it 1, 1 and 2. Just put a little line on them. Makes it easier so you don't get confused. And then 3 and 4. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but I just put a little line on these to kind of label them so I'll know which line goes where. So I'm just going to connect these up. So 1 and 2. Make sure you connect it in the right channel. You can see on the bottom of the nays goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to go this way. 1 and 2. 3 and 4. Just like that. And then I'm going to put it back on my quad. And then make sure you have your nays 32 pointed the way you want it, like this. This is the front. And then my arrow is pointing to the right. Well, first I'm going to put these through the hole. Well, basically I'll just tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it through the hole, and then I'm going to kind of measure how long I need for this. And I'm just going to cut and solder it back on. So just a quick note before you start cutting and soldering these signal wires. You need to connect the channels from the nays 32. This is channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, according to these ESCs. So this will be channel 1, channel 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so once you have all your signal leads cut and soldered back on the ESCs, it should look something like this. You can see I labeled these little wires. So this one is number 1, this one is number 2. And these are the longer leads because I'm going to wrap it under the frame and come up this way to the nays 32. And then this one is 3, this one is 4. And you can see I also put on the negative lead for the signal, because if later after we hook up the motors, we're going to solder it directly on the ESCs. If we need to reverse the motors, we can do that in BL Heli, or if we need to tune anything on the ESCs, we'll have these black leads to hook up to the BL Heli. So next what we're going to do is we're going to install the power cable and the VBAT for the OSDoge board. Damn, that was hard to say. Okay, so let's do the power cable first. I'm going to hook it up right here like this because I'm going to have my power cable coming out the side this way so I can connect to the battery coming this way. First thing, I'm gonna put a wire mesh around my power cable first. So to do this, after you have your length cut, I usually like to use a lighter and just burn the edges just a little bit, so the wires don't go crazy once you start putting it through the wires. So just do it like this, kind of push it on through first. And then you can grab one end and push it like this, and grab and push it on. Like a caterpillar. Don't worry if it comes apart a little bit. We're going to put a little bit of heat shrink on it to tighten it up. Like that. And then on the heat shrink, if it's not big enough, if your size is a little too small, you can just take a pair of pliers, just put them in, open it up a little bit, just so they'll fit. Okay, so once you have your heat shrink on, just take your lighter and just tighten it up. When you do this, you want to use the blue part of the frame, or the blue part of the flame. So if you use the orange, you're going to end up with black stuff, black residue looking stuff all over your wires. Okay, so I'm just going to put it right here. So let me tin my board first, and then we'll solder it on. Okay, so this is what it'll look like once you're done with it. Like that. And then next we're going to put a little 2-pin connector from one of the leads. This is going to connect to the VBAT on the OSDoge. So I'm just going to pick this one that I'm not using over here, and I already measured the length. And we are done. Okay, so the power distribution board is all wired up and ready to be ready for the motors to be mounted. If you're going to be connecting the LEDs, you would just connect it up to here, positive to positive, negative, negative. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so next we're going to install the motors onto the ESCs. So I've already pre-measured my wires to where they will go under or through this little hole, and then go here, and then on the underside it's going to mount to the ESCs like that. So before I do that, I'm going to put some wire mesh around my motor wires. So same thing, I just pre-measured it, and then I'm going to burn the edges just a little bit to keep them not going so crazy once we start pushing them through. So same thing, you're just going to feed the wires through the holes. Push it on like that, and then I'll get some heat shrink. Just open it up a little bit again. I like to use heat shrink that's a little bit smaller, and then stretch it out, because that way when you shrink it up, it shrinks smaller. Whereas if you started with a fat heat shrink, it doesn't shrink as small. That, and then I'm just going to shrink one side of it. There. Now you're ready to wire this thing up to your ESCs. Okay, so just one more thing before we start soldering the motors to the ESCs. One thing that I noticed, if you connect the motors to the ESCs like this with the right wire, connect to the right connection point, the center to center and left to the left, so basically straight on like this, the motor will spin counterclockwise. And if you reverse one of them like this, just say this one goes to the right and the left of the motor goes to center, and center of motor goes to left of ESC, it'll spin clockwise. Okay, so we're going to connect the motors like this. The motor 1, we're going to connect with one of the wires crossed like this, and then this will make it spin clockwise. And then for ESCs 2 and 3, we'll connect it straight on without crossing any of the wires, and that'll give you a counterclockwise rotation. Okay, so now we're ready to solder our motors onto the ESCs. I'll do motor number 3 first. I'll just show you how to do it, and then you can do the rest. Okay, so one thing to remember is that after you put the motor through the hole, just make sure you put on your heat shrink through the motor first, so that once you solder up your motor, you can just slip this through and cover your ESC with the heat shrink. So let me position this. and one is done. Okay, and then once you have this soldered up, you can just slip this heat shrink onto the ESC, and then that way your ESC will be protected. Like that, and then you just heat shrink it onto the ESC, and then you're just going to do the same for the other 3 motors. So once you have your motor wires soldered onto your ESCs and the heat shrink put on the ESCs, this is what it should look like. I already mounted the motors with the M3x6 screws. The Cobra motors came with the M3x6 but a Phillips head, so I just replaced them with the little button heads I have. And then I temporarily mounted my power distribution board on. I didn't mount them on permanently yet because later on we might have to reverse some of the motors when we're testing the motors in clean flight. And I haven't put heat shrink on the negative leads on the ESCs yet. Okay, so next we're going to prepare the OSDoge board to be mounted on the nays. But before you can solder it up, you have to select these little jumpers on the back to the configuration of your quad. The first one is the power. If you're going to be using a 3-cell battery, you need to set this little jumper on the right side. To do that, there's 3 little solder pads like that, and just put a blob of solder in between the 2 that you want. So for the 12 volt, if you're going to select for 3S, just put the blob on the center pad in the right pad. And then if you're going to do the 4S setup, you need to set it on the left side, which is already set. That's default. If you don't do this, if say you're running a 4-cell and you don't set it to this to 12 volt regulated and have it set to direct to the 12 volt, when you connect your 4-cell, all these little 12 volts you see are going to be 14, or it's going to be 4-cell. I think it's 14 volts or something. So you need to make sure you set this. So select your battery input, and then the next one would be your video transmitter. If you're using a 12 volt, use the left side jumper. If you're using 5, do the 5 on the right. And then for your camera, if you're using a 12 volt camera like I'm using, set the jumper on the 12. And then if you're using like a Fat Shark, is it CCD or CMOS? Yeah, CMOS 5 volt, you would do the 5 volt. Okay. So on this board, it's going to connect to the nays like this, stacked on top. So the connection points on your OSDoge to the nays are going to be, let's see, is going to be the RXTX right here and right here. This is going to let you control your PIDs from your controller. And then to power your nays, you're going to connect it to right here, ground and 5 volt. And it's going to go into the power on channel 6 on the nays 32. And then for the VBAT, which is right here, is going to connect to the VBAT on the nays 32 right here. You can go on my website and I have detailed pictures of how exactly you connect, or where the connection should go. So to do this, you just get these little male and female header pins, just put them together, and then you just put them into the holes that you're going to be connecting. Or first, put the little nylon standoffs that came with the kit on your nays, so when you stack it on top, your pins will line up perfectly, and then you can start soldering everything. So once everything is soldered, if you line up the holes like this, your pins will go in perfectly. Like this. That's the TX-RX, and then for the 5 volt input, I'm going to go right here. And then next you just put this on top. and you just line up the holes and then you solder it up. Okay, so once you have your NAES 32 stacked on top of your, or the OSDoge stacked on top of your NAES 32, I got my connection points right there, there, and there. And you can see on the other side it's right there, there, and there. And you have it lined up with the standoffs, and just put a little nut on there to keep it in place. The rest of it is pretty easy. I have my soldering iron set to about 650, so it should be a pretty fast solder up. Hopefully you can see that right there. So I'll just start with this one. When you're soldering, make sure you're heating up the pad along with the pin, and you're not just dripping solder onto the solder points. Okay, so the OSDoge is done. Now I'm going to do the NAES. Pretty much the same thing. Okay, so I'm done. So now when you pull these apart, you'll see that the pins line up perfectly. Like this. So now you got these pins, they line up perfectly with these. Just like that. And then while I'm at it, I'm just going to solder on the 6-pin 90-degree header for the FPV connection part. This one just goes like that. I'm gonna face it inside just because it makes everything nice and neater. Okay, and then now I'm gonna set the jumper on my VTX to 12 volt because I'm using the Immersion RC 600 milliwatt. So here I'm just gonna put 2 blobs of solder on the pads. Here's 1, 2, and then you just connect them together just like that. So now you can see I have my OSDoge board set up for a 12 volt camera, 12 volt video transmitter, and I have the 12 volt regulated because I'll be running 4S. If you're running 3S, set it to this jumper, which is it connects this to this and this directly to the battery. Okay, so once you have your OSDoge board all soldered up, we're pretty much ready to mount the NAES and the OSD board back onto the frame. So just remember where you had your wires, you know, which channels go where, and then just connect them up to the NAES. So I'm just going to make sure I have these correct. Channel 1 is on the left, like this, and then 3 is in the middle, 4 is on the outside. Connect it just like that, and then the OSD is going to stack on top, and then this is that little the little 2-pin connector I had soldered onto the power distribution board. That's going to go on the VBAT on the OSD board. So make sure you have this facing the correct way, otherwise it won't stack correctly. And make sure you put the ground on the left, or towards the edge, and VBAT on the right. Otherwise, bad things will happen when you try to hook it up. Oh yeah, and then put the little plastic standoffs that came in the OSD kit on top. Okay, so before I put the board on, I'll just go do a quick summary of what's on the NAES 32. Alright, so basically you have your channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 connected to the ESCs 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we got the power for the NAES 32 coming in the power and ground on channel 6. And that's going to connect up to the OSD board coming in right here on the 5-volt and ground. It's going to connect when you stack up. And then this is the transmitter and receiver, or TX-RX, for the PID tuning. And then this is your VBAT. If you weren't using the OSD board, normally you would connect this VBAT onto the power distribution board. But since we're using the OSD, it's going to come through this VBAT and go through here and connect. And then later on, we'll just solder on the three-wire connector for the D4R2. But I'll do that in part 2 of this video. So now you're just going to stack this onto your board with your VBAT connected. So just line up the holes, and then your header pins on the bottom should just connect. They should line up perfectly for you. And then just like that, you put it on. Oh, one thing I forgot to put on the NAES 32 is a little 2-pin connector for the buzzer. We'll do that in part 2 of this video. So this pretty much concludes part 1 of the video. In part 2, I'll show you how to program your NAES, set up your OSD board, connect the D4R2 and your FPV part, all on these pins right here. So check back in part 2 of the video, and I'll show you how to get this thing flying.